Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go. Finding life along the way, melodies we haven't played. No, I don't want no rest. Echoing around these walls, fighting to create a song. I don't wanna miss a beat. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go. And we'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands. And we'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the.
Alright, hey everyone. Sorry about that. I had to ran into some technical difficulties setting up my lab environment to start programming tonight. So thanks for everyone watching. So tonight, based on the first stream, after talking through the tool or the project we'll be working on, we're going to quickly go over some of the elements of Fast API, which is the web framework, the Python web framework that this tool is based on, and then kind of start diving into the code tonight. And then we'll go over, I made like a to-do list, so that way we can kind of look at what's ahead, and everyone's able to follow along a little better. And that way I'm also not just, blabbering on forever and ever, and you guys have an idea of what we'll actually be doing. So I guess let's go ahead and quickly look, like I said, let's start with Fast API and diving into the code a little bit. I expect I'll probably be streaming for about an hour or so, hour and a half. But if there's any questions as we're going along, please put them in the chat. Definitely, don't think any question's dumb, because it's taken a while just to get to this point, and I'm sure you'll definitely see me struggle as we move forward. So, all right, so let's dive in here. So I went over some of the, well, actually, before we even get started, I posted a link to the code on GitHub earlier today. So initially this was a private repository, but today I had some time to create a README before the stream, and so that way it kind of highlights what we've been talking about. So let me just share that real quick, and hopefully I noticed after looking at the recording, gathering some feedback from people watching the stream, that the text is kind of small, and the quality could be a little better. So the stream is kind of limited at 720p. That's mostly due to the platform I'm using called Restream, just on the free tier for right now. So that kind of limits the quality, but hopefully by zooming in on the text a little bit, you guys are able to read it, and it's not as blurry. So, and if it is blurry, like I said, let me know through the chat, and we'll kind of go from there. But so this is the NetCheck repository. You can clone it if you'd like. I'll put a link to it in the chat. I posted it on Twitter as well, but hopefully that sends here. All right, cool. All right, looks like it sent out to both Twitch and YouTube. So yeah, so go ahead and feel free to clone it, take a look at it. I didn't put instructions on installing it, so that's something I actually am supposed to do before the stream, but I'll try to work on that and have it posted tomorrow at some point. But essentially, if you're familiar with Python and any sort of installing any projects from GitHub, so Python uses a package manager called pip, and pip is what you use to install all the third-party packages, everything we've went over, ranging from fast API to PyTS and Genie, Batfish. So all of that is the Python packages for those libraries you would install using pip, and a common mechanism for making sure that we're on the same page. So let's say I'm running tests and I'm developing on my end and you want to develop on your end. Well, all these libraries get updated, right? So whether they're monthly releases, quarterly releases, never seen a quarterly release, but mostly monthly releases. Obviously versions can differ. There's bug patches, there's features that are deprecated with newer features or versions, I should say. So, a common way to get this up and running is using a requirements text file, so requirements.txt. And honestly, thinking back on it, I probably should have just started at 0. And this is something I'll highlight and make a more thorough installation guide on this GitHub, and I'll tweet out whenever I actually have that posted. But at a high level, this kind of locks all the versions in that I've been using. So you'll see that Genie's here that we talked about in the last stream, PyTS, and we passed it. It's in the Fast API is right here. You could tell Fast API is new just looking at the version number. Everyone does versioning different. So for example, PyTS uses a calendar versioning. So here you'll notice, if you read it from left to right, 21 is the year, the 8's the month, and then 2, it's not actually the day. So that does kind of can throw people off. That's actually the patch number. So, for example, with Genie, it looks like there was 2 patches in the month of August. And you can see here with PyTS, and I'm not running the latest, so I know that 21.9 was just released recently, within the past day or so. But, at the time that I basically gather, you can generate a requirements file using pip. It kind of freezes everything. So, that way, like I said, it locks in the version. But yeah, you'll see here, year, month, and then patch. And that's specifically just for PyTS and Genie. Obviously, like you see here, like Python decouple, PyTest 6.2.5. Some of these libraries may be using like your traditional version 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, So you have to actually read the documentation on how they version if you're interested. But anyways, this requirements.txt file is used for me to lock down what I've tested and what goes with this library, or I'm sorry, this project. So, like I said, I'll put an installation document together so that way you're able just to run through the steps and you can get this thing downloaded. But in the meantime, you could definitely, if you know how to use pip and a requirements file to install the environment and set up a virtual Python environment, do so and definitely try it out. There's really, besides actually getting the packages installed, really the only other thing that you need to do is make sure you're in the virtual environment. So here, I know I'm in the virtual environment I just named it venv, but you can name it whatever. And you can see that all of the packages are installed using a command pip list. Right, and you can see all of that list, this list here is the same that's in that requirements text file that I just showed you. Right, so anyways, once all that's installed, honestly, the only thing you need to do is make sure that you're in the NetCheck directory. So when you first clone this directory, or I'm sorry, you clone this project, you'll see these lists of directories here. You'll only see actually tests and NetCheck. You'll see get ignore and requirements as well, but you won't see this venv, mostly because the virtual environment, that's kind of a local PC thing. So you'll create your own virtual environment based on this requirements file. So make sure you go to NetCheck. Oh, hey, I think that's James. I noticed by the last name. You're just on Twitch tonight, so hey, appreciate it. Thank you. Let me know if you have any questions as we move along. So I changed it into the NetCheck directory. You'll see a bunch of file names, but the main.py is kind of what runs the whole project. So to run it, I actually put a comment in here. This is just for myself because this is the first time I've used this, I guess you can't really call it a framework, but picture, I guess the best way you can think of, and I'm talking about Uvicorn, it's called, not unicorn, but Uvicorn. It is let me just pull it up. Uvicorn. Funny enough, they use a unicorn as their logo, but yeah, you see the Fast API logo. That's not necessarily coupling it directly with Fast API. It's just that it works well with Fast API. So yeah, you'll see it's called an ASGI server implementation. ASGI, basically think of the best way I can explain it, and I literally just read about this today because I wanted to learn more about ASGI. So it stands for Asynchronous Server Gateway Interface. So think of it as you have a web server. So Apache, Nginx. You have that, which is its own configuration in itself. But an Nginx, Apache, all like that can serve any web page, right? It's very common if you're going to a website that you're hitting some sort of proxy. Most likely Nginx is a very popular package to do that. So you have Nginx, right, that can host or serve up the web pages and act as a proxy. And then you have your Python project, which in our case is, NetCheck. And they don't directly talk to one another. So Nginx is the web server, and what we have here is a web framework. And I've said it a few times that Fast API is the web framework we're using in this project. But other popular ones, actually probably a little more popular for now, is Django and Flask. And those two are considered web frameworks. Django is a more complete web framework, and when I say complete, I should say batteries included. It kind of tells you how to, everything from your database to your templating language on how you would format the front end, or include variables and information in your HTML pages. All that's included within Django. and it's a more, I guess, fuller framework. And then you have Flask, which is more of it's very flexible, it's very easy to get up and running, and it touts itself as a micro framework. And Fast API is more or less like Flask, but it has some asynchronous functionality, and that's a whole other asynchronous versus synchronous. To give you a quick example, asynchronous basically allows you to, if you ever go to a website and let's say you want to generate, like in this case, we're running tests against our network. You generate or run a test against the network, and all the background tasks you have to do, like log into the network devices, pull the proper data, and then run tests against that data. While it's all happening, a synchronous application would basically sit there and wait and spin and give you that that loading dial. So if you're on Mac, it gives you that beach ball, or Windows, it sits there with that spinning circle, and you basically have to wait for that response. And then with asynchronous, asynchronous allows you to, perform that same task, run a test against the network, and then you get an automatic response that would say something like, all right, task in progress, here's your task ID. And basically think of it as like a receipt. And then you basically can check up, and in the background, the application will check and say, all right, is it done yet? Wait a couple seconds, is it done yet? And then it will return the results whenever it's ready. But in the meantime, you could still click around the different web pages. So that's at a very high level what synchronous versus asynchronous is. And what Fast API allows you to do is choose either or. So you could do synchronous or asynchronous, whereas Flask, up until recently, is synchronous. So that's kind of at a high level. I know I went off in a tangent there, but let's see. Sebi Core, what are you building? When framework, web framework. So I'm building a tool that basically it interacts. It interacts with network devices. For right now, it's specifically Cisco network devices, and what it will do is it will gather information and basically run tests against that information. So if you're familiar with network engineering, then you'll understand it a little better as we go through. But at a high level, that's what it's doing. It has a web front end and also an API. So we're kind of just working through the web front end, and honestly, we're touching all parts of it. We're going to be touching the front end. We're going to be touching kind of the tests and the models, the database, or the SQL models that we have. So it's definitely going to be a ride. I don't know whether you meant to say when framework or web framework. But the web framework that I'm using is called Fast API, and I'll put the link in the chat. I think I may have not done that last night, but that way you can take a look at it. Yeah, James. Yeah, the beach ball. I mean, the beach ball is kind of it's a little excessive with this application right now. It's synchronous. And you don't get a beach ball, luckily, but yeah, it's tough. Asynchronous will definitely be the way to go, especially in the future. And you see that with common applications today. I mean, for example, you have like Amazon, right? When you add an item to your cart, you could get redirected to the cart, and it could ask you to check out right away, but in the background, like, you could add multiple items at the same time, and Amazon doesn't freeze up, right? I mean, you kind of have to think about it at scale. Like, you have millions of people trying to add stuff to cart, delete stuff from the cart, so there's plenty of different examples out there. All right. So anyways, so Unicorn, I mean, I went off on that ASGI rant, but essentially think of it as this is the Python package that builds the bridge between your web server, the one that hosts the files, and your Python project. or your web framework. And in this case, we're using Fast API. So that's why you see here, to run the app, you use the unicorn command. And then you say main app, and then the -- reload. That's used specifically for development environments. So basically, if we have it running here, I'll just start running it. And we made a change, right? Let's say we made a front end change, and we wanted to change, something on the front on a drop down menu, right? Obviously, that would change, how the app would appear. So whenever we save that file, whenever the HTML file we change, it will reload this server automatically. Hey, Michael. Hey, how are you? Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, so let's see. I'll just open up the server, right? So nice part is too, and I'll try to scoot it to the side. It's kind of tough here, but basically I'll click on different links, and down here, because we're in kind of the development mode per se, you would never run this application like this if you were to put this on your network or in production in any way. But let's say I'm going to go to the validation page. So you'll see, you do a GET request to /validation, and it's 200 OK. And then analysis, about, and then back to home. So yeah, so this is the part of Fast API. This allows you kind of to run, actually I take that back. This is unicorn, that is showing kind of these log messages here. Fast API just allows you to serve, it serves at the web pages and all the data. All right. So before we get any deeper into it, I was originally planning to have my EvenG set up. So EvenG is a virtual network simulator. I was planning to have that set up, so I have it in Google Cloud or GCP, and I originally was going to VPN, because I have a open VPN server in Google Cloud, VPN into my Google Cloud VPC, and then be able just to run everything as if it was local, right? Connect to the network devices as if it was sitting on my office desk. So, but the VPN was acting up, which is also why I was running just a little bit late. So we won't really have a true network device to mess around with tonight, which is fine. I'll definitely get something working for next time. But tonight we're going to be working on some models with the data, some models with that interact with the database, and then so you have your data models and then your table models, and I'll kind of explain that a little bit, because you may have heard it, and you might hear of like, okay, I've heard models in Django has their own models, and then you've probably heard of like data serialization and validation. Like there's a bunch of kind of words floating around right now. As you build out more mature applications, you want to have some sort of model that the data adheres by. Otherwise, you don't want to pass around like just random Python dictionaries that may or may not look like what we should be interacting with. So I'll go ahead, and like I mentioned before, I have this create test results function. It runs every single time that the application starts up. So every time I reboot, so like right now, and you could even see it in the logs here, right? So you'll see like I add a bunch of data, and it's just dummy data, but it allows the SQLite database to be built, and then we could actually mess with like the API and look at the different data within the database. So, and I'll quickly share that as well. I'll have to I always forget about SQLite. Let's see. Select all items in table. SQLite is, it runs the same syntax, but in order to get into it, let's see, SQLite, open SQLite. And you probably only see half my browser, but I'm literally just Googling how to open SQLite. They make a DB browser, but I'm not real interested in a GUI. I'd rather just use the command line. All right. So you go into, our database is right here, database.db. And to get into it, we'll do SQLite. I think we need the 3, right? Oh, yeah, I guess we do. 3 database.db. Maybe not. Maybe not the 3. Let me see. If you want to open it, simply run SQLite. I think I have it installed here. Yeah, SQL Alchemy, SQL model. Shouldn't really need to enter anything else. SQLite 3. Database.db. Well, maybe not. Maybe we will take a look at database. Opening a new database connection. Just make sure, do one last thing, make sure that I'm in the right, my environment was set right. Now let's try it. NetCheck, Sqlite 3, database. No, well, it's fine. Try SQL Tools VS plugin. Oh, okay. Oops. I don't know if I have that though. Let me try it though. SQL Tools. This one here. Insert only. Cool. Oh, you know what? Maybe I needed this installed actually. I wonder if that same command will work. Nope. So we'll just use this here. Add a new connection. Oh no, that's a new SQL file. Weird. Sqlite. Oh, you had it. Okay. Oh, okay. call it NetCheck DB. Problem is, I don't know how to call it. Actually, let me Ubuntu 1804. NetCheck. PWD. Wonder if this will work. Might save my day. Holy crap. Dan code NetCheck database .db test connection. I don't know how it would work though with trying to figure out how it would work with WSL, because it's saved, but how do I reference that? Sorry. I'll mess around with it. It's not a huge deal. Because we're going to look at the data anyways, just in another way. We can actually look through the API. But I appreciate the SQL Tools plugin suggestion. I'll definitely take a look at it. I just want to get back to actually explaining the code a little more. All right. So, yeah, sorry about that disruption there. So yeah, we create the test results. We select all the test results. Actually, we don't. That's just a function I was testing out. But yeah, and then we create the database and the table here. Let me find it. Yeah, backend.db. So just to kind of explain where everything's at real quickly. So everything under the NetCheck folder is the application, right? So we have our API, we have backend, we have front end, helpers. So I just made this folder, and in no way is this like a template of how you need to do it or how you should do it. This is kind of just what made sense to me, and I definitely foresee like myself refactoring some of this in the future as this application grows. But we have helpers, and the helpers are basically for helper functions. So let's jump into validation real quick, right? So a good example, right, is we generate a test bed, and normally, like I showed everyone the last stream, you can generate it using a YAML file. So it's very easy to read. You have your keys, colon, and then your value. But in the backend with PyTS, it essentially transfers that YAML file into a Python dictionary anyways. And they actually show you how to, in the PyTS docs, how to create a test bed using a Python dictionary. I believe the heading for that section is called like manually creating a path is. All right, so I am going to copy that down, Aptum. I really appreciate your help there, but I won't waste any more time on stream doing it, but I'll definitely look at it after stream and try to get it ready for the next stream. But I really appreciate your help with that. So these helper functions here, they're literally just used so that way all this code, like, one of the big keys with Python, when you're trying to evolve from scripting to actually creating like an application, is kind of modulating things. So the idea is not to have everything in one single file. And you hear that a lot, but it's different when you actually put it into practice. So in this case, if you look at main.py, you'll see, and this isn't really good practice either. I don't want to. So like what I'm doing right now is I'm doing a bunch of imports, and actually I believe the best practice is not to import more than 7 modules. And you can tell I'm definitely I'm over that by maybe 1 or 2. But the idea is we have these modules in a separate file. So that way, we don't have all these functions in the same file. So you'll see from helpers.validation, so helpers validation, which is this file here, we import all these different modules. And when I say modules, think of them as these functions here. And I can just do this real quick so you can view them all, right? But yeah, anything related to what PyATS is doing in this, what I'm calling the validation piece, is going to be included in this file. So that way, all the functions can be just, if I need to change something, let's say like when I want to generate a test bed, right? I don't know how many times I'm going to generate a test bed. A PyATS test bed, but let's say I want to do it like 10 times in like 10 different files, at least if I need to change something, I can do it here. So that way I'm not going to 10 different files and moving things around. And so it helps in that way too. It makes the other files less messy because we're splitting functionality up, but it also allows you to, it basically allows you to edit in one place. So that way, you don't have to jump between multiple files. So, but the generate testbed one's a perfect example, right? I explained it kind of on the last stream, but the front end, you plug in the host name, device IP, and OS type. And I think it's still up, right? Yep. So you'll see here, right? So we're putting in the host name, the OS, which, because the OS is so important, that's something I didn't want to include as a text input, because obviously we all make typos, and maybe you have a pretty green engineer that's just starting, that doesn't know all the different operating systems, particularly with Cisco. But let's say we expand this tool into Junos or other vendors. They might look at this list and be like, iOS, a lot of people think of like Apple and the iPhone, but yeah, they may have never even heard of ASA. So that's why it's a drop down, is so that way it kind of it helps with making sure that there's certain specific data going in, so it kind of limits your choices, but it also makes sure that you can't put in just dummy data into that. And then lastly, the device IP. And so if you look back here, you'll see, we pass in the host name, device IP, and OS type. And we basically just pass it directly into the testbed. Yes, there could be a little, like some more sanitation. Basically, we could do some making sure that, no one's trying to run any specific like SQL injection, some more like putting on the security cap, making sure no one's trying to expose our application. But obviously, like you can see here, I'm, just started building this, and definitely learning along the way. So yeah, if anyone thinks of anything while you're watching streaming, or even if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to message me and be like, hey, I saw this part, and this definitely could be changed around a little bit. So anyways, all it does is it generates this Python dictionary, and we assign it to the variable called TB. And then we essentially dump it into a temporary, what we're calling a temporary folder, and converting it to YAML. So funny enough, for this specific use case, this testbed will be for a single device. So I actually need to go back through and rename. I have to rename this method for generate single testbed, or single device test bed, because we're only running the test against one device. As this application grows, I can imagine where we're going to be running it across many devices. Let's say in the future, I picture like you provide a site name maybe, and you would have every single device at that site, and you could maybe run an entire test against it. Like, you can even do like breaking tests, for example. Like, let's say there's redundant links from the switch to the two routers at the site. For example, it's a dual router site, right? You would maybe shut down one of those redundant links to test to make sure redundancy works, right? So there's more than just show commands that I'm doing. There's actually better examples on PyITS, their documentation. But yeah, that's like a good example where you could literally break something and then have it revert that change all within the test. So break something, run a couple show commands, revert the change, and then run show commands again, and then do a diff on the two on the two outputs. So plenty of things you can do with that. But in this case, yeah, we're just doing a single device in this test bed, and ultimately we're converting it to YAML. Right. So anyways, so we generated the test bed with the inputs. We're running the PyITS job. We're getting the results, parsing out we're parsing out only the files that the data points that we want. So whenever you run a PyITS job using it's called EasyPy, you can, because there's two ways to execute a PyITS job or a test. You can use the standalone execution or the EasyPy. And in this case, we'll just go to the docs. And in this case, we are using EasyPy. So I originally had a good plan with running the standalone executor. So so I'm kind of just jumping through it, but the AE test infrastructure, this gives you all like the high level, what's it made of, how to run it, and then some examples. But you can see, they flat out say two primary methods are standalone and then through EasyPy. So the EasyPy is a little different because you can create multiple test scripts. So let's say you had one that tests just the WAN, and then you had another one that tested the layer 2 switches at the site. Well, using EasyPy, you could run both of those test scripts using one execution or one job file. In this case, what they're describing. This helps because it aggregates all the results for you, and creates archives and logs. And what you can use with those logs is you can run a diff. So let's say you run a test, you break something, or let's say you make a change, you can then run those same tests again and compare the archive logs. So that way you can kind of do a diff, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to show that. I know I said we were going to focus more on the code tonight, but that's a major difference here. And it even says like, hey, this is best suited for rapid script development without the need to create log archives. So I'm not rolling out standalone because there's definitely use cases to run just standalone. And basically what standalone does is it prints all, pass or fail right in the terminal. And that's something I'll probably show in the next stream once I have, the EvenG environment working. That we'll do a standalone and then we'll do an EasyPy execution so you can see the difference. So so as I mentioned, we're using EasyPy to run within PyITS. The EasyPy execution model, I guess you could call it, framework, to execute and run the playbook or run the tests, and then these get automatically logged. So I don't have any logs here to show you because this is like a fresh clone as of like Monday probably. But Yeah, so just at a high level, just wanted to keep it high level with you and not. I don't want to go into each of these methods. Like I said, you can clone all this code and kind of review it and then read through the PyTS documentation. I'm going to try to cover as much as I can, on stream, but I don't want to bore everyone to death if there are people out there that do know PyTS and Genie. So I don't want to be the person that's just an e-reader that's basically just reading you documentation. We will be looking at documentation, but that's if we're not sure of something and we need to. So anyways, these are all of our what I call our helper functions. They basically they do a job and they have one specific item to be returned. And you can see here, this is actually a cool feature of Python that not many people take advantage of or learn right away. So as you know, like with Python, it's called a loosely typed language, and the reason it's called that is because you can literally, like, just as an example, right, you can do a equals 2, b equals 5, and then it's going to be a plus b, right? And then if your program ran this, equals 7, right? So the reason it's loosely typed is because whenever I did a equals 2, I didn't have to say, oh yeah, and by the way, a is actually an integer, right? Because that's, going back to basic kind of programming knowledge, is every variable, has an assigned data type to it. So, you have your integers, your float, which is, your decimal basically, string, Boolean, which is your true false. So, yeah, so it's loosely typed because I didn't have to actually say a is an integer and a equals 2, right? I can kind of just say, yep, a equals 2, and they take it as is. So the cool thing with Python is, yeah, it's easy to learn that way, but, as we move further and further in maturing our projects, and like I said, I'm kind of at the point where I'm out of scripts, just building a script that I run through a terminal and it just prints out the results. Not saying I'm not doing that, because there are plenty of use cases where you just need to get something working, and just writing a quick, a single file script that you run in the terminal will get the job done. So don't ever kind of look down like, oh yeah, I'm done with scripts, I'm building full, like, no. Because if you have a situation where you need to do something quick and dirty, you're not going to build out a full application to run, let's say push out configuration, or there's a lot involved with that, don't get me wrong, or collecting a bunch of information like show data, or even a more simpler example, reading data from like a CSV or Excel file. Like, you're not going to build out a full-blown program or application for that. You're going to write a script to get the job done. So but yeah, so I'm kind of at the point though where I'm trying to build, this is my first application, or as whatever you'd want to call it at this point, but I'm trying to build on what I know and what I've learned, and as I'm learning, I'm trying to implement what I'm learning. So for example, what you're seeing here, it's called type hinting, and the purpose of it is, as I just showed, being a loosely typed language, you can get lost in the sauce really easy, right? You can be like, a equals 2 up here, and then down here, you might be like, oh yeah, oops. We'll do a equals 2. All right, and just imagine, right, there's a bunch of code. And then down here we'll be like, oh yeah, a equals 12. And then maybe we'll make it a function that is like called addition, right? And you put in a couple parameters, and then we just say like, oh yeah, a plus b equals c, and then return c. And then so like, a is reassigned to the same variable, right? So really by the time a gets down here, it equals 12, and at that point, you have no idea what a is. Is it an integer? Honestly, a better example would be, you would reassign the variable a to a string and just call it, put my name. So then whenever you try to do the addition, it will come back and be like, hey buddy, you're trying to add a string to an integer. Like, that's not gonna work, right? So that helps with, these type hints help with validation. They help with linting your code. So like if I'm in this function, right, and like you can see here, when I highlight over it, it says hostname : string. So I know that a string is going to go here, right? It's going to be fed in as a parameter. A string is going to be fed in as a parameter, and it's going to be added to the dictionary here. Device IP, it's also a string. All these are strings in this instance, but that's what type hinting. It allows you to do that, and the easiest way, you put a colon, and this is just for parameters for our functions, but you put a colon and then you put whatever it is. So let's say this was actually going to be an integer, right? You would put int, and then whenever I put int up here, I can go into my function and say, okay, well, this parameter is going to be expected to be an integer, right? So that's kind of type hinting. And then lastly, this little arrow and then none. So all this is saying is at the end of this, we're not returning a value, which is true because we don't have a return statement. All this does, and technically I guess I could say it doesn't really return, but it writes to a file. And I'm sure there's a way that I could type hint that. But here's a good example, right? So this is going to run a job file. So you provide a job file name, which is a string, and then the current directory that you're in, and then it returns this results path. And if you just looked at return results path without having that highlighted, you're not going to know it's a string that's being returned. So that's type hinting. And I'm sorry if you feel that I'm kind of jumping around, but I just feel like there's little details that I know, like I've watched other, whether it's be videos or streaming, and some people, you kind of highlight, some people highlight over things, and something else catches your eye as we're looking through some code, and it's like, I wish I knew if he would explain what this is, right? So I just feel like something like type hints, especially because you'll see them a lot through the project. I just wanted to get that out there and explain it firsthand before, there are kind of further questions. But if there are further questions on it, I can definitely put you on the right path and show you kind of some of the libraries that do type hinting or help with data validation, and yeah, kind of go from there. So, all right. So let's see. So the database didn't work. I'll get that working by the next stream. So let's see. I'll just quickly go over, and this is the main file. So I guess so you see a bunch of imports here, right? These are all from, you can see the libraries, and if you do pip list, like I've done down here, right, you can see all the different libraries and packages, Python packages we installed, and then these are the ones that we're using. And really, like, I didn't know right away like where to look within this. A lot of times they have like each of these packages, the documentation have like quick start guides or tutorials, and you kind of just go through the tutorials and then you understand, like, for example, like no one can ever guess like, oh yeah, I imagine Fast API, it has a a sub module named templating, right? And then, oh yeah, I want Jinja 2. I know it's called Jinja 2 templates. Like, you don't really know that. That's something you just have to read and find out in the documentation. So even something like finding all these imports, it takes a while. And that's just a combination of learning the library or package that you're using and reading and like doing the tutorials with it. So Fast API, I think, has one of the best documentation I've seen. It's very straightforward. It doesn't assume anything. It doesn't just, there's some that like has notes that say, hey, if you already know about this feature of Python, just skip ahead. But it really goes, step 1, 2, 3, 4, like it kind of just rolls, and really anyone can pick it up. Anyone that has some very basic programming knowledge can pick it up and kind of go through the tutorial. So Yep. So here we have the app directory. It's always just good. It's, to identify the directory and the path that your application is located. So that way, if you need to use it to instantiate anything else. So for example, creating the SQL database, the database file, SQLite database file, I would use this app directory to say, okay, let's just put it right here in the root of the project. So there's that. Then we start kind of getting into defining the application. So, with Fast API, you're going to have, you have to define the app. And in this case, you see, there's plenty of parameters that go into it, and you can kind of read through. And the nice part is, like you can see here with VS Code, you could read through everything and all the parameters, right? So, can I highlight? Ooh, perfect. You can see here description, right? Is right here, and it's expecting a string, and it says equals empty colons. So what that stands for is that's the default value. So if you don't enter a description here, then it's not going to, by default, it won't include a description in your application. Version, you can see there's a default value of 0.1.0. And I mean, the list goes on and on, right? And so this is actually a nice perk of two things. An IDE, like in our case is VS Code, PyCharm, Atom, like there's plenty of there's IDEs out there, so don't get, this is not specific to VS Code, but, you can highlight over a module or a class, and it will show you all of the parameters, potentially what it returns. If you instantiate it, you can then look at some of the attributes or things that you can do with it. So it's very cool in that way. And also, like, second point are the type hints, right? A description, if you want to identify a description equals, and then you have to put in a string. And if you don't, it's by default going to be none. So in this case, we just created a variable up here and just assigned it to a string, saying it's gonna use to validate and perform tests against your network. We're just calling it version 1. Honestly, I probably should not take the V out maybe and just put 1 or 1.0, and then a title to the API. Cool. Thanks, James. Glad you're enjoying it. I appreciate you joining tonight. And let me know if you have any other questions. I know sometimes there's a lot to take in, so let me know on Twitter, or we can talk during the next stream as well. But thanks for watching tonight. All right, so we initiated the application. All this, like I said, populates the database for us, the SQLite, and then down here you'll see app.include_router. So at a high level, I mentioned that this is an API. This has an API backend, and yeah, James, I'm hoping it will start syncing. So James mentions he says, I hope it'll start syncing in at some point. Yeah, it will. The thing is, you have to start coding as well. So I appreciate watching me. But you can look at my code, now it's on GitHub, and just mess around with it. I mean, just messing around with the code will definitely, make it sink in and make you kind of a better programmer as well. Kind of, you'll learn at a much quicker pace. So anyways, so this include router, this is basically used for our API. So this basically allows any API request to come in. It will hit this endpoint /API/v1, and then after it, then it kind of routes to the different endpoints. So whenever I say endpoint, I'm talking like, some will go to PyTS, or the validation endpoint, and then there's a second endpoint for Batfish, which does the analysis, right? We'll get into the API at a later time, but just know that that's kind of what that does. That kind of brings it all together. And presents it to the user. And then the rest of these are, so you'll see here the front end static, the mount what this does is, the HTML and the CSS and all like the web pages, or I'm sorry, the all the code and everything that contributes to the front end, your JavaScript, HTML, CSS, all that's stored in the front end static folder. And you'll see right here, JS. Actually, I take that back, because the HTML, the HTML is different because we put variables and data into the HTML. So the front end static just has our CSS and our JavaScript files. So you'll see here, CSS is Bootstrap, JavaScript is a custom JavaScript file. So this is kind of where we get into the front end piece of it down here, the front end views. You'll see there's a variable called templates, and we, like I mentioned before, we're using Jinja 2. It's a common template language. It's used with Flask. I'm sure if Flask, Ansible, a lot of, specifically around network automation, you hear Jinja 2 a lot, right? That's like the default templating engine. It's very simple. It basically allows you to do very, very high level code per se on like just text essentially. You can go way deeper, but Jinja 2, if you want to like know more about Jinja 2, just look it up. There's plenty of use cases, but specifically around a web framework, Jinja 2 works, is traditionally paired with Flask. And then obviously in this case, you can use it with Fast API. So anyways, we create a templates variable and assign it and say, all right, well, our Jinja 2 templates live in this directory. Like I said, the appdir, it's just good to have a variable that that holds the value of where your application lives. So in this case, appdir and then front end templates. So you basically go to the root of the application, front end, and then templates. And you go in here and you see all of our HTML. So index, for example, is our home page. So you'll see, it explains what NetCheck is, and it explains, validations are, it's the same thing that you see right here. So that's our home page. And you'll see validation analysis in the About tab. You'll see that those pages are here as well. Base is actually used for basically anything on the web front end that doesn't change, right? So one thing that's consistent, something you learn with web design is your website should be consistent. So for example, your navigation bar, if you're gonna on your homepage have your navigation bar horizontal, you should probably keep it horizontal throughout the other pages. Could you imagine if I clicked, hey, let me go to validation or analysis, and the navigation bar, started going vertical, right? That would be so confusing. So the base HTML or the base template is used for, in our case, it initializes some of the JavaScript being used in the CSS, and then it also includes the navigation bar. And then you'll see down here, there's a block for content. And then that base is inherited throughout all the other pages. So that's where you see extends base HTML. That's all being used in every other page. So that way, that's how every page has that navigation bar, and it stays the same throughout. All right, let's see. Time check. All right, we're a little over an hour, so I'm gonna try to wrap it up here in about 20 minutes or so. I'm gonna just quickly finish this main file, and then we'll go over actual tasks that I plan to do. I know I mentioned tonight we'll get to coding. We are kind of looking at the code, but we'll actually start typing code here in the next stream or two. But it's good to I want to explain it before I just kind of dive into it. Otherwise, I'm just here for you to hear keyboard clicks. So we'll look through the rest of main, and then as we move on, we'll go through the API, and kind of some things that we'll actually be working on and improving. So as I mentioned, all those where those templates live are saved in a templates variable, and we have the front end views, and so you'll see it's pretty straightforward. We have a what are called routes, and essentially if you look up in in the URL, right, you'll see that the route changes. So this page is /validation, this one's /analysis /API or API /about. And so each of these app.get are the different routes, and the response class is basically saying, okay, well, what do you want to return? In this case, we want to return an HTML response, which are those templates here, which you can see, and HTML file types. So, we basically say our response is going to be an HTML response. And then if we go into the actual function, you can see these are all defined as async. There's really nothing right now that they need to be asynchronous. So I mentioned in the beginning about async versus synchronous. There's no reason that they need to be async right now, but in the future they will. For some of them, like these get forms where you're just getting the HTML form to fill out. There's really no heavy duty tasks that require you to wait. It's just loading up text essentially. This post is something different, and we'll kind of dive into that further next time. But essentially these first few are just the tabs across the top, across the nav bar. So yeah, return templates.template response, and then the name of the template file. So you can see conveniently the routes and the HTML file names are the same. There's a obvious reason behind that. So that way, if you go to our site, if you go to /analysis, and you could analysis, if you type it in, it takes you to the same page as if you would just click on analysis. So that's where kind of the routing is at. So the route's handled up here in what this is called a decorator. I won't get into that, but just so that way what the @ symbol means. But yeah, so we have the route, and then okay, well, if I go to this route, what do you want me to present? Well, return this template, this validation HTML template, or this analysis, whatever the route matches. So those are the main web pages, and each of them will have forms, and it'll have there'll be some more meat to this as we kind of build it out a little more. The posts, like I said, I'll mention next time, but at a high level, we fill out this form. We'll just say router 1. The OS is iOS, and we just say 10.1.1. As soon as I click submit, this post method gets invoked. So all of this happens in the background. This is where we can introduce some async functionality, because there's a lot happening. You can, if you remember back in the helpers folder, we had generate testbed, we had run the job, get the job results, parse the job results, read the device. There's a lot going on here. Granted, all these might take sub-second response time, but if the user wants to go through and do some other job, or let's say they want to view another web page, we want to let them do that. So for right now, this is all synchronous, but at some point I'd like to move this to async functionality. But just know that anytime you see a post, there is data being submitted to the framework or to the application, and then we're doing something with that data. In this case, we're going through a plethora of different functionality, but maybe you take in some data and you say, hey, if the host name equals this, then return this, right? So yeah, so that's it for the main file, and I kept the front end views in the main file. The API is all in its own folder here. and you'll see, like, if you break it down, API v1, as you know, if you've messed with any APIs, you'll know that they have iterations, and v1, v2, as more endpoints get developed and customized, you'll have more iterations, just like anything in programming. You get a new version or a software update. Well, in this case, we would just make a new API version. So, but you can see there's different endpoints and I don't want to even open any of these files because, they'll go down a rabbit hole there. But just know that the API has all of its routes and everything in its own separate files and folder. So let's see. That's it for main. All right, so let's get to, because I want to wrap up here soon, the actual, what we're working on, right? So, or what we will be working on. So, I use this app called Todoist. I use it for a lot of things. I use it to track workouts, track work, track, personal projects. So it's a very cool app. So if you're looking for some sort of, something to track your tasks, or, the most common use case is like a grocery list, right? So if you're interested in any sort of app to track that, Todoist, and you can see up here, it's Todoist. It's a free app. There is a paid version, but I haven't had a need to pay for it yet. But it's very good. But I'll be using it to track the tasks that we'll be doing for this application, for this project. So you'll see I labeled them all with the NetCheck label, which is why they all say NetCheck here. But from a naming perspective, I'm leading it off with what are we affecting, right? Or what are we going to be looking at? So most of it, as you can see here, is PyTS. There's one to do for the web, and that may change. But there's nothing yet for Batfish or the analysis portion of the tool. And like I mentioned before, I really want to finish the PyTS portion before we jump into another functionality or the other feature of the tool. So there's a couple more things to oh, hey Aaron, how are you doing? Thanks for joining. I'm actually I'm wrapping up here soon, but yeah, just you can stick around. We're actually going through some important details right now of what we'll be doing for the project. What are you doing? So I'm actually building an application, a Python web application to, So it's related to connecting to network infrastructure devices and running tests against them. I'll keep it at a pretty high level there with that. So, but yeah, that's what we're doing. And I was actually just, like I said, I was just going over kind of, this is like the to-do list for the next few streams. No, not Django. So I'm actually using Fast API. I don't have the tab open still, but yeah, I'm using Fast API to build it. It's gonna double up. It's gonna have a web interface. So this is the web interface here. But it does have an API as well, and I can show you that. So as you can see, it has an API as well. Very beginning stages. So we're just starting this project. I've been working at it for about a month now, just to get like everything built out. But yeah, the idea is you can either consume it through this API, or you can consume it using the web front end as well. So, but yeah, it's called the framework's called Fast API. So it's more relative, like if you're familiar with Flask. Machine learning. Do you like machine learning stuff? Don't know anything about machine learning. So, yeah. So back to what we were looking at here, the to-do list here. So yeah, so most of it will be surrounding PyATS. There's gonna be one front end change, and maybe there's a way I could tag, or I should tag some of these tasks. But for example, like this one is disabling the submit buttons when a job is kicked off. This is assuming that we're sticking with the synchronous functionality of the web front end versus moving to async. So I might move that towards, put that at a lower priority. But the rest, yeah, we'll be building database or table models. We'll be figuring out what those are and then how to implement them and kind of show it in real time. So good amount of stuff to do. I kind of made this list here within the past week or so, and these are just kind of my ideas. We'll definitely, we might change things around. We might delete some of these. It really depends. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. And that's all I had for tonight. I wanted, just kind of wanted to go over at a high level, explaining the code before we start diving in actually coding, and then doing the just showing some of the tasks that we'll be going over in the future, and some of the features we'll be creating and enhancing. So if you have any questions in the meantime between streams, I think Tuesday, Thursday will probably be my stream schedule. I'm still debating about timing, 7 or 8 p.m. So kind of look out for that. I'm kind of leaning towards the later time, around 8 p.m. Eastern, just because I think more people may be able to join around that time. I think 7 p.m. could be too early, especially for the West Coast. And so, yeah, I just wanted to go over the code tonight, and during the next stream, we'll be diving into actually performing a task, and I'll have something running with EvenG. So that way we can start configuring network devices and running some sample tests against them, and actually kind of diving in a little more versus explaining at a high level. So, and then if there's questions along the way, I can answer those as well. So, hey, thanks, Aaron, for jumping in. You have a good night as well. And yeah, if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at DevNetDan. And have a good night, everyone. Thanks.